Hello, anti-novelists and friends. This is Victoria from Zettelkasten for Fiction, where imagination finds order. What we are looking at is the full printed out manuscript of the Zettelkasten for Fiction. Woo! Now, this is parts 1 through 3 that are finished. I'm still writing parts 4 and 5. But today I want to take you to the graphic that opens part 1 of chapter 1. So there's been some questions about what exactly does this workflow look like? Like how does this function as a writing environment? That's what I want to talk to you about today. So let's look at this. This is the architecture of Zettelkasten for Fiction. So this diagram shows you in one full environment how I use this system. So let's look. Up here, this is the note card zone. So this is the zone where you are doing thinking, you're doing research, you're just creating those note cards that are going to inform your writing, all right? What does that look like? The note card zone consists of 3 parts. There's thinking, there's actual research, and then there's development. And each of those items have cards generated within them that live over in your Zettelkasten, okay? So let's look at thinking. Thinking is brainstorming. It's those cards where maybe you're capturing your experiences in those experience collection cards. Maybe you are capturing what I like to refer to as flash bunnies. Flash bunnies are like plot bunnies. Plot bunnies are when you're writing, all kinds of ideas are popping up everywhere. Ooh, I could do this. Ooh, I could do that. Ooh, I could do that. All kinds of ideas for plot. Flash bunnies are just more things other than plot. It could be a scene, it could be a piece of dialogue, it could be another plot point, it could be something totally unrelated, it could be an idea for a whole new book. Those are flash bunnies. Those little ideas that pop up all over the place that for me, generally speaking, will end up in either one of my little mobile decks, which you know look like these. It could end up just in general note cards. It could end up in my card file for future ideas. You never know. But those little flash bunnies, those little ideas that just pop up during your day or while you're walking your dog or whatever, those are flash bunnies. And those all get corralled for me in these little miniature decks of cards for safekeeping and filing later. Then there's general plotting. General plotting cards are those things that maybe you're filing those in your plot sandwich, or you're tucking those into your plot box where you think they might show up in your story. Or you're just filing them in your Zettelkasten under whatever general category they belong. Maybe you're researching plant biology because it might be relevant to a character. Well, that would be general plotting or general character development, so it's going to go under those categories in your Zettelkasten. Let's go to the next box. That covers your thinking cards. Your research cards. This is where you're doing those research items. Like I just mentioned, maybe you're reading a nonfiction book on plant biology because you need to understand how that applies to one of your characters and their career. Maybe you're reading relevant fiction. Don't discount looking into other books in your genre to make decisions about what to or what not to include. Maybe someone else has done a really great treatment of how someone uses tarot cards in their story, and you think, oof, I was going to use those, but I think I better find a different magical system because XYZ author did that so well. I don't want to touch that. I want to come up with my own thing, right? So relevant fiction is often a great resource. I will caution you, however, make sure that you do your due diligence. And if, let's say, that author who you thought wrote such a great story that involved tarot cards, do a little research on tarot. Make sure that they got it right. If you're going to use that idea in some way, make it your own by doing your own research about it. Don't just rely on another fiction author's interpretation of something as gospel, because they could have gotten it wrong, or they could have taken artistic license and changed up the facts. So always do your own due diligence. Then there are other forms of research. For example, interviews. Anything from the real world, from nonfiction that you're using to inform your story goes in your research cards. And again, those are going to get filed under your general Zettelkasten categories where they would go. or they could be filed under your general plotting or your Flash Bunnies, or they could go in your experience collection. They could go where your scenes are filed if you have those in a category. There's lots of different ways to divide up your research, but again, you're putting it in the most intuitive place that makes sense to you. The third component of the note card zone, in addition to thinking and research, is development. This is the actual building blocks of your story. We're talking about your character development cards, which are going to have a set for each main character and each important side character. You're going to do some setting and scene development. Those could live under categories that involve scenes or settings. They could live under real places. Like, let's say you read an author, John Jones, who wrote a book about the development of downtown Kansas City in the 1920s, and that's what you're using to write out the setting for a scene that you set in Kansas City in the 1920s. So that's obviously going to be filed under John Jones and that book, but it's relevant to your setting. So it's going to be installed somewhere in your story world of Zettelkasten cards. And then finally, plot. And you know, if you follow me, that I like to use either the plot sandwich or the plot box, which are mirrors of each other, but that's just a place where I can bookmark and slip in scenes and ideas at the point I think they might belong in the story that I'm working on. So that is the note card zone. Now you'll notice the note card zone feeds the Zettelkasten zone, and the Zettelkasten zone feeds back up to the note card zone. This is a closed system that functions in a circle, constantly washing, rinsing, and repeating around through each other. So I might take cards out of the note card zone, and they may end up in my main box where they're filed and stored. Or maybe they end up in my plot box. See how that works? So I'm creating my cards up here for the categories that I need for my writing, and then down in the Zettelkasten, they're getting filed in one of these two places. They're either getting filed in my main box, which is where I can do my filing and storage. I can access the addresses using my index and my keywords. And I can also make revelations and discoveries, because when those cards are all situated next to each other over in my main box, I'm going to see them and make associations and discoveries because they're there. And then, of course, my plot box. Those are my 32 potential plot points and beats that help guide me through what could be the main touch points or key points of a story. If you're using the traditional 8 plot point conflict-driven Western style narrative, which I talk about that in my book, Zettelkasten for Fiction, and how there are many other examples. This is just the first one that we start with. All of these items, your note card building and writing, and your filing and sorting, feed into the writing zone. The writing zone begins with drafting those actual drafts of each scene and its sequel and tethering those into chapters, and of course rewriting. This is a constant circle of action. Maybe you're going up to grab a note card from something that you've brainstormed, or you're going to grab something out of your main box that you've done research on. You're going to bring that down here, you're going to draft that piece, and then that that draft, that scene, sequel, chapter, what have you, is going to end up in your final folders, which are where you're sequencing your story based on the plot points. So you go from note cards, which hold the places for where things could go, to drafting, to then filing those drafts in the order that they belong in your story, and then those get typed out into your finished drafts, and those are what you populate, like I have here, into a binder where I print out all of my finished drafts, and then I can see those as finished pieces of the story and start to look at the thing as a whole. So I hope that was helpful. That was a quick walk around what the Zettelkasten for Fiction environment looks like and how you might go about using it. So as always, thank you so much for your attention and your questions. Keep them coming. I absolutely love getting your questions and answering them. And I will continue down this road and keep breaking things down and explaining them as you have curiosity or questions about them. So as always, thank you for your time, and I will see you in the next video.